I didn't leave with a fight. No slammed doors, no shouting, no last dramatic speech. I left quietly, the way people do when they've already said everything 100 times and finally understand none of it was heard. My name is Marcus. I'm 39. And for a long time, I believed staying silent was the same as being patient. When I met Evelyn, she had this calm confidence that made you feel safe just standing next to her. She didn't demand attention. She didn't need to. People noticed her anyway. I was drawn to that. We built a life that looked solid from the outside. Good jobs, a clean apartment, dinners together most nights. Friends used to say we were steady. At the time, I took that as a compliment. But steady slowly turned into predictable, and predictable turned into invisible. It didn't happen all at once. It never does. It started with small things. Conversations where she nodded but didn't really listen. Plans decided without asking me. Jokes that landed flat not because they weren't funny, but because she'd already checked out. I told myself this was normal. Long-term relationships settle. That's what people say. You trade excitement for comfort. I accepted that deal without realizing I was the only one paying for it. I became the reliable background presence in her life. The man who handled things. Bills, errands, fixing what broke. I was useful. I was dependable. And slowly that became all I was. Not desired. Not chosen. Just assumed. There was a moment years in when I tried to talk about it. I didn't accuse. I didn't raise my voice. I said, I feel like I'm fading out of my own life. She laughed softly and told me I was overthinking. That she loved me. That I was always so serious. Then she changed the subject. That was her pattern. Reassure just enough, then move on. If this part of the story feels familiar, tap like or share it so it reaches someone who might need to hear it. Not everyone realizes what quiet neglect looks like until it's already reshaped them. Over time, I stopped bringing things up. Not because they stopped hurting, but because I learned how the conversation would end before it began. Silence became easier. I started spending more time at work, not because I loved it, but because at least there I was seen. At least there, effort produced results. Evelyn didn't notice the shift. Or maybe she did and assumed I'd always be there regardless. That was the unspoken agreement, I think. I was stable. I wasn't going anywhere. People like me rarely do. The irony is, the moment you stop asking for space in someone's life is usually the moment you start planning your exit, even if you don't know it yet. One night, we were sitting on opposite ends of the couch. The TV was on, but neither of us was watching. She was scrolling on her phone. I was staring at nothing. I realized I couldn't remember the last time she'd asked me how I was and waited for the answer. Not as a formality. Genuinely. That realization didn't hurt sharply. It was dull, heavy, final. I went to bed early. She didn't notice. That night, I lay awake thinking about how strange it was to feel lonely next to someone who claimed to love you. Loneliness, I learned, isn't about being alone. It's about being unnecessary. If you've ever felt that kind of quiet loneliness, type "seen" in the comments. Not for me, for yourself. The next weeks passed like any other. From the outside, nothing changed. Inside, everything had. I stopped trying to be more because I finally understood I was already enough. Just not for her. And that difference matters more than people admit. I didn't pack my bags that day. I didn't announce anything. I simply began detaching piece by piece, preparing myself for a version of life where my presence wasn't taken for granted. What Evelyn didn't realize was this. People don't leave when they're angry. They leave when they're clear. And clarity is quiet. Clarity didn't arrive as courage. It arrived as calm. The kind of calm that shows up when you finally stop negotiating with yourself. I started noticing how light I felt when Evelyn wasn't around. Not happy, just unburdened. That's when I knew something fundamental had shifted. I didn't rush the decision. I observed. I paid attention to patterns instead of excuses. How my opinions were met with indifference. How my absence barely registered. How she talked about the future using I instead of we. None of it was cruel. That was the problem. There was no villain to blame, no dramatic betrayal to point at. Just erosion. The night I decided to leave was ordinary, almost insulting in how normal it was. We ate dinner in silence. She mentioned a weekend plan she'd made with friends. Didn't ask if I wanted to come. Didn't even notice when I nodded. I realized something then. If I stayed, this would be my life. Not bad enough to justify leaving in other people's eyes, but empty enough to disappear inside. I waited a week, not out of fear, out of respect for myself. I wanted to be sure I wasn't acting from emotion. I wasn't. I was acting from truth. I packed while she was at work. Nothing dramatic. Clothes, documents, the things that were mine. I left the apartment clean, the way I always did. Old habits die quietly. I wrote a note. Not long. Not angry. Just honest. I said I wasn't leaving to punish her. I was leaving to preserve myself. I said I deserved to be in a place where my presence mattered. I wished her well because I genuinely did. When she came home, I was already gone. Her first call came an hour later. Then another. Then messages. Confused. Upset. Shocked. She said she didn't understand. She asked how I could just leave without a conversation. I didn't respond immediately. Not to be cruel, but because I understood something she didn't yet. Conversations only work when both people are listening. Ours had ended years ago. Do you think leaving quietly is strength or avoidance? Share your thoughts in the comments. This story lives in that question. The next day we talked. Calmly. She cried. She said she never thought I'd actually go. That sentence stayed with me. Not because it hurt, but because it explained everything. She hadn't valued my presence. She'd relied on my permanence. I told her I didn't want revenge, space, or closure rituals. I wanted forward motion. She asked if there was someone else. There wasn't. There never had been. I wasn't running toward another person. I was walking back toward myself. After I left, something unexpected happened. People noticed. Friends reached out. My energy changed. I slept better. I laughed without forcing it. For the first time in years, my life felt responsive. When I spoke, the world answered. Evelyn tried to reconnect weeks later. Small messages, memories, regret disguised as nostalgia. I didn't hate her for it. I understood. Loss always clarifies value, just rarely in time. I replied kindly, firmly. Some doors don't need to be slammed to stay closed. If you believe self-respect sometimes looks like walking away without applause, type quiet exit below. Let's talk about it. Here's what I learned, and this matters. Staying too long teaches people how little they can give you without consequence. Leaving teaches them what you were worth all along. Not for revenge, for truth. People think power comes from confrontation. Sometimes it does. But sometimes power comes from absence. From choosing not to argue your value to someone who benefits from misunderstanding it. I didn't leave because I stopped loving her. I left because I started loving myself enough to notice the difference between being needed and being taken for granted. If you're waiting for a sign to leave, you probably don't need one. The fact that you're looking is already your answer. If this story resonated, like and comment with one word that describes how it made you feel. And subscribe for stories that explore self-respect, quiet strength, and the moments that change everything.